what it is, y'all. Let's get into it. Episode 11. Now, before we get out of the gate on this one, let me just say, let me get the numbers out of the way, right? Story-wise, 10. Rock solid, 10. Super happy with that, with the way everything played out. Even sound-wise, 10. Couldn't be happier. Couldn't be more excited. Animation-wise, now, I will be the first to admit, there are so many things happening in this episode that I didn't personally notice anything out of context. A lot of times there's off-model issues or framing issues or things like that. I was so into this episode, I hate to say I didn't pay a huge amount of attention. There were some really, really, really tiny things here or there, but this is about as good as we've seen JC Staff, save for maybe some of the stuff from last season. So I'm going to give it a 9. Very, very minuscule things. Nothing to super harp on, because the action was just about, I wouldn't say perfect, but it was really good. They ramped up the frame rate when they needed to. It's the first time in a long time where I have actually watched an episode and gone, is this a modern studio? No, it's JC Staff. Wow. Okay. Y'all listen. I couldn't be happier. I absolutely couldn't be happier with any of that. So let's just gushing aside. I'm very happy with the way they did it. I can't give them a perfect 10, but very, very happy. So all in all, this episode was crazy. We're going to go ahead and get into the synopsis. There's a lot of stuff I want to discuss here. But let me just say right out of the gate, you have to remember a number of things as you're going into this episode. So if you have not watched the episode, go do so. But I would highly implore you, remember as much as you can from earlier in the series, because a lot of it comes back into play. A lot of it does. So, I'll say right now, major spoilers coming if you haven't watched the episode. So go do so. Come back. Make sure you guys drop a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. And with that warning out of the way, let's get into the synopsis. So, when we open up, we get a little bit of a backtracking from the prior episode. We've got Cassandra coming forth with her little warning about, she said, the Ottar, the boar and the chariot, and all this stuff is just with her, as always, with her dreams, heavy hyperbole, and, that is what it is. But we see the full army that has now allied itself with the Hestia Familia. It's not the whole Hestia Familia, but it's everyone that's allied themselves with the Hestia Familia, and it is magic. It is crazy. It is insane. And literally, it's just a swath, just a mass of people from around Arario. Some faces we know, some faces we don't know, and just some random ongoings. But really, it's nuts. It like I said last episode, it almost feels like it's the whole town against the Freya Familia, with some very rare exceptions. And I think there's even some things that are going to happen in the next episode that are really going to blow your mind if you haven't figured out what's coming yet. But, and we'll get a little bit to that here in a moment. But to kind of kick this off, we have basically everybody going out, and they have to find the Freya Familia. There's this mention that Freya and the other goddesses are wearing these corsages, basically these flowers. So they don't actually have to capture the, they call it hide and seek, but it's more like CTF. They don't have to capture the goddess, they just have to basically take the flower from them, essentially is what it is. So that way they're not harming anybody or anything like that. It is technically a war game, less an actual war. Very, very, very dissimilar to the war game that we saw with Apollo. Now, another thing that I think is really interesting, comparing and contrasting the war game with Apollo, is everything here seems to be done in outside the city, in this crazy, I guess not technically outside, but in this I don't want to call it a wasteland, but it's definitely well outside the norm. where the war game between the Apollo Familia and the Freya Familia, or the Hestia Familia, oh my god, don't let me make that mistake. That war game just kind of was all over town. Random people were getting caught up in it. It was crazy. So when they proposed this war game, you start getting this notion of, oh my god, the Freya Familia. Like, this is a way bigger threat than Apollo ever was. But because of that, everything is very confined to like a certain area. And there's even this notion that early on they show Hestia and Hephaestus hiding, like literally hiding. And Hestia even mentions, like, should we stay on the move or should we just stay here? And Hephaestus is just like, I don't think it matters. I think no matter what, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And it is going to be spectacular, win or lose. And we find out very quickly as all the forces of the Hestia allied Familia, or all the alliance with the Hestia Familia, just kind of go into this, like, wasteland, and they're trying to find the Freya Familia, and they can't. And what winds up happening is you find out that Freya's in one place, in a very obvious place. She's not hiding. But her entire familia is essentially surrounding her, up to and including this crazy mofo right here. So when they find them, it is no longer a game of hide and seek. They even mentioned, like, it kind of is that old saying of the best defense is a good offense, which I think is supposed to be the other way around, but it doesn't matter. They do seem to be encircling Freya, but it's more like, you come to us. We are bringing the fight to you, but you come to us in the first place. And they do. And it is brutal. So when they first, like, lay eyes on this huge siege that the Freya Familia is essentially raining down on them, it's a small squadron of these troops, but you find out that more and more and more are showing up, and they're basically flanking them, right? And we also know that Welf has made a bunch of magic swords for these people. So as the Freya Familia comes down on them, they're like, okay, we are outclassed. We are out, but by a margin. We're by a wide margin. We're outclassed. But they have the magic swords, and they just start unleashing these wave after wave of magic sword attacks, just magic attacks that on those units, and they get wiped out. They get right back up. They get wiped out. They get right back up. And at one point, I can't remember her name, but the healer girl from the Freya Familia comes out, and she is literally just 3rd degree or worse burns from head to toe. Parts of her bone structure is showing. Her muscle structure is showing. She is wrecked out, but she is walking and healing actively and healing everyone around her. It's a visceral, scary, brutal image of the determination of the Freya Familia and all these people that are allied themselves with Freya. And she even mentions, she's like, you're going to have to do better than that. This is who I am. She says, my name is Gold. She unleashes this just swath of essentially unkillable foes onto the Hestia Familia, and it is crazy. But as all this insanity is happening, as everything's just kind of going off around them, Haruhime drops a level boost on everybody that's out there, and that just elevates their skills to the next level. And as everything, like one side gets an advantage, and another side takes the advantage, another side takes the advantage. So as the Freya side takes the advantage back from the Hestia side, then Mord comes out with his guys, and he's just like, you guys can heal, and that's great, but you can't cast healing if you're just constantly being assaulted. So he's like, they're doing everything they can to keep them on the defensive. And we get all these little, like, one-on-one skirmishes, as well as just these hordes of people that are now being attacked by all these people. Like, it's just a numbers game at some point. And while it is it raw numbers going to win, or is it like raw power is going to win? And it's just back and forth. And Mord's crew is just unleashing all these magical attacks from their magical swords, while everybody else is just kind of doing their just fighting their fights, and it is just insane. But as all this is going on, we get a couple of little tiny skirmishes. So we get a skirmish with Tsubaki and Hegni, and that skirmish is great because you find out that essentially Hegni is casting he casts a spell on himself so that he's no longer like awkward. He's no longer essentially. It kind of masks his true personality, and it breaks him, breaks him down. It does the opposite. It actually just kind of nullifies him, so that now he can just be raw, offensive, scary, and frankly, like very intimidating. And he is incredibly intimidating. And he and Tsubaki fight, and Tsubaki manages to damage him, but he essentially is able to just, inflict an insane wound on her, and it is really crazy. But meanwhile, we have Welf, who's facing off against Alan. Welf has a level boost, and Alan is just almost too much for him. It's so crazy. But we get the Alfred brothers. They're facing off against Mikoto and Aisha, and just all this stuff. But in the meanwhile, we keep getting these shots of Bell, who's literally just running around. He's running, and at this point, he's finally cloaked, and you hear this sound, and it's actually him charging his Argonaut skill. And he mentions, he's like, we have to have he and Lily kind of decide, we have to have this fully charged up. We get one shot to take down Ottar. If we don't get this shot off, do the absolute best we can, it's a done deal. We will not win the day. And as Bell is charging ahead, Vaughn comes out of nowhere. The little squirrely dude who was kind of like training Bell and all that before he stepped back in when Bell was part of the Familia. You watch the season, you have that worked out. Anyway, and as Vaughn unleashes an attack, he's like, listen, nobody knows I'm here. I'm doing this of my own accord. I know you, and you know me, and we know how this is going to play out. But as Vaughn is just shooting his mouth off, the thing you have to remember, when Bell was brought into the Freya Familia, he had not yet fully leveled up. His skills were still somewhat locked behind that gate that Hestia had kept up. She hadn't fully unleashed his skills yet. Plus, Bell had been getting beaten down day after day after day after day, and we know that Bell basically gets a Zenkai boost, right? Like, there's just no other way to word it. He essentially gets a Saiyan Zenkai boost, and so he has leveled up in such a way now that Vaughn, while he thinks he's got a slight advantage, or at least can stand a chance, Bell is like, we may have at one point been equals, but now you're just too slow. And as Vaughn is unleashing the biggest attack he possibly can, Bell literally sees it in slow motion and knocks him out cold. And that's when this dude shows up. And this is the part of the episode that was just the best. It was mind-blowing. It's such a throwback. Because if you remember, Season 1, they reveal that Ottar was sent down into the dungeon to pick out the Minotaur that essentially became mysterious eventually, to train the Minotaur, and he's got those two big swords, and he throws one to Bell. Now, it's not the first time we've seen Bell with a huge sword. This is something that they have been leading up to, and they've been basically warning was going to happen for some time. Bell gets the sword, and he imbues it with Firebolt, and he is able to stall just long enough that his Argonaut skill fully powers up, and you literally see this burst of flame on the sword, and he is ready to unleash an attack. And he goes in, and Otaro's like, you get one shot, dude. You better land it right. You better do well. And the shot is so powerful, it launches. And it's actually crazy, too, because while he says you get one shot, he didn't say he wasn't going to try to counter it. He just said you get one hit. He called it a free hit. I would argue that that's not necessarily what a free hit is, but it is what it is. And Bell comes down, and their swords clash. And Ottar has imbued this power to his sword that everyone is like, this is crazy. This is the skill we don't want to see. He has taken down level 7 adventurers with relative ease with this skill. It is nuts. And the two clash, and Bell is blown backwards into the wall. And it is such a huge force that literally the sword in his hand has shattered, has exploded, and all he's got in his hand is just the hilt. That is it. Everything else is effectively... It is such a huge hit. Basically, this Colosseum where they're at erupts into basically a mushroom cloud. And it vaporizes the two swords. I want you to think about how hard this has to hit to vaporize not one, but two giant hunks of steel. It's completely insane. Bell is blown backwards into the wall and just, blown asunder, essentially. And as he looks up, as the smoke clears, there's Ottar standing there with the shattered, he's also got just the hilt. And he throws it aside. And as Bell is observing the situation, he realized that at some point Ottar was also blown back into the wall, but he's standing there. So it's hard to tell if he was blown back and is recovered and is now standing there, or if that was just the force of the blast and he still stood there. Either way, it's a menacing, insane. The aura that this guy is exuding is just on a whole other level. And literally, completely literally. So he mentions Bell. He's like, that was a great shot. He's like, I'd say you and I, in that one clash, we were equals. But if I'm going to be honest with myself, based on your level, yours was probably a superior strike. So he's implying that if they were on the same level, Bell would have overcome him. But they're not at the same level. And Ottar's like, it was a good try. And I appreciate it. And I congratulate you. But now I have to break you. And he pulls out another sword, swings it at Bell, and Bell is just rolls out of the way. Just rolls out of the way. And Ottar is just like, dude doesn't play around, right? What you see is what you get with him. He's basically surface deep, and that's about it. There might be a little bit more going on, but not by much. Like, the dude is very surface level. And he says, he's like, listen, if you're going to be the one to have our goddess's affection, if you're going to be the one that is worthy of her love, if you're going to be the one that she is going to strive for, you're going to have to beat me. And don't mistake this as a moment of jealousy. Don't mistake this as anything more than the surface level. What Ottar wants is not Freya himself. What he wants is whatever she wants. Nothing more, nothing less. He is, for all intents and purposes, solely, and I believe this is actually confirmed by Omori, solely interested in her best interests. That's it. No more, no less. She says she wants Bell. Cool. She's going to get Bell. But she's not just going to get Bell. She's going to get the best version of Bell that she can have. And so he's like, if I have to beat the snot out of you, and I have to break you down, and I have to unlock every last, even to the most microscopic scintilla of potential that you have, we will do that. You'll bleed. You will hurt. Your bones will break. Your body, your will, your everything will fracture. It will crumble. But she's going to get the best part of you that she could possibly have, because that's what she wants and that's what she deserves. That's what he's here for. Don't mistake it. He's not jealous of Belle, but he just wants to bring out the best in Belle. I mean, who hasn't like gone out of the way to get like a crazy gift for somebody? Like, oh, I really hope this person appreciates it. And even Freya's just kind of casually like watching everything go down, more or less. And she's just like, okay, just don't permanently damage him, right? Like, so long as he can be glued back together, I'm good. Like, don't damage him to a point where he can't be healed. And, you know, bathe him, bring him to me, and I'll consider it satisfactory. Yes, I'm paraphrasing, but that is essentially what they're saying. Don't break him beyond what you need to. Other than that, go ham. And that is where the episode basically culminates. It's insane! If you can't tell, I loved this episode. And I'm going to revise my anime score. I'm going to give it an 11. And here's why. The animation was not on the level that I want it to be at. That's that. But I want to say, I always run this to the side here to give myself some little clues while I'm watching this. And I'm kind of watching the Ottar fight go down. And I'm watching all the little nuances. I'm watching a full 30 frame, or 24 frame fight go on before me. I'm watching JC Staff put everything they have into this. And I'm watching them, you know, I'm not so egotistical to think that anybody from JC Staff is watching my reviews and is saying, hey, here's this random guy sitting in the United States, you know, with, you know, 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, and, oh, we have to, you know, bend to his will. No. But I think I can fully appreciate the fact that they have taken, I'm sure, relatively normal criticism of, hey, you guys could do better. Why don't you do better? And they have done it. I think this episode is as good as JC Staff is able to produce at the end of 2024. It's more than I expect out of them. It's not what I want, but if I'm totally honest here, I think they pull it out all the stops. They've done everything they could do, and then some. And I think what I've seen is from 5 seasons now of this anime, I think we've seen a drastic improvement. So while it is kind of cliche to say, oh, it's an 11 out of 10, I honestly want to revise my score. And the more I think about it, I really appreciate what this episode represents. Is it perfect? No. But that's not the point. It is a major level up in comparison to even the beginning of this season. And I appreciate that. So there you guys go. Whole episode is a 10 1/3 out of 10. And even that might be a low score. Let me know what you guys think. And if you weren't aware, what's coming up next week is going to be even better. It is, next week's going to be crazy, y'all. Next week is going to be completely and totally nuts. Go watch the intro if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Also, remember the next episode is called Estrella Record. And I probably should not be the Estrella Record, but if you know what that means, you know what that means. If you don't, you're about to find out. See you guys then. I absolutely cannot wait.